It's the Green Rush Nation podcast. I just had the bluest dream that you've ever seen, and I can't believe that shit was green, cause it hit so clean, and my history is a mystery. I don't give a fuck, I just hit the tree on the 5th degree. We don't pit for free. If you don't got 5 shit, get up and leave. It's the Green Rush Nation podcast. Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy B-Gunz here on the Green Rush Nation podcast. Today we have someone who's changing things for the entire industry. He's going to make things a lot easier for a lot of you guys out there. Some of you may know him by his work, but not by his face. Our friend Bryce from MyTrace.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good. How was your travel in?
It took a little bit, but I'm here.
Okay. I know Orange County is not the easiest place to get here from, but hey. Yeah. We made it work, right?
It was raining yesterday, so I was like ready for it being cold, and then it's like hot out, so I was like,
what the fuck, bro?
Yeah, right?
Summer's coming. That's what that means.
Yeah, all right. And I'm ready for it. So.
Yeah, same here. It still just blows my mind, though, when it gets like over 100 degrees. I'm like, what the fuck, bro? Right. How do people live in this? But, I can't hear me anymore.
I can hear you.
You can hear me, yeah, for sure. There it goes. It's back. All right. So here on the Green Rush Nation podcast, we don't want to just know about you and your great business venture. I know you're not a huge smoker, but you have smoked, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when was your first encounter with the plant, and do you remember it?
Okay. 2 situations.
Okay.
First one was that I was with my friend. We were in Newport, and he was kind of having a panic attack. And so he had some like gummies like in his car, right? And so he didn't tell me it was infused.
Okay.
And so I found that out basically as we were driving home.
Great.
So yeah, lights started to bend, sound went out, and I'm just like, what is this, right?
Uh-huh.
And yeah, he said that I had a very different reaction than what most people have, right? And I think I slept for 17 hours that next morning, right? So that was, my first introduction to cannabis in general.
And you had no idea you were taking them. You were just taking gummies.
I was just like, it's just candy, right? And I'm hungry, and, it's like 2 a.m, so why not?
2 a.m., good time to take them.
Yeah, right? So, I get home, and I'm just like, where am I?
Yeah.
So.
That's funny. So your first experience was with an edible.
It was with an edible.
That's not the common first experience. I'm not going to lie.
That's actually my preference at this point, right?
Okay.
Because, I've tried pens, I've tried blunts, spliffs, whatever, right? And I don't really feel any of it. And then I do an edible, and I'm just like, all right, we're here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, it'll definitely get you there.
Yeah.
That's for damn sure. And so you're not a huge smoker, though?
No, not really.
Gotcha.
I mean, I guess I just don't really like the burn as much.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, I'll never forget. First time I met Bryce, I just assumed that a lot of people in the street smoke. So when he came in, I was like, hop in the whip. And I'm taking a fat dab, and he's like, oh. I was like, oh, shit, do you smoke? He's like, no. I'm like, damn, I'm sorry.
Let's just hotbox him right here.
Yep. But so I learned real quick. But it's super cool. So were you always in marijuana, or I know you have tech and music background. What was the intriguing thing to get you over into the marijuana space?
Okay. So let's take a step back. Right?
Absolutely.
So my first job was at an event company.
Okay.
So I had literally just finished school, and I had applied to whatever I found online, right? For like web development jobs, that sort of thing. So I applied to this job, and basically I go into their office in like Lake Forest in Orange County, and they're like, oh, by the way, this is for the Super Bowl. Right. So like my first job is literally just doing something for the Super Bowl. So like, you go from school to like, okay, here's this big sporting event.
Wow.
Right. So I was working there for a little bit, and then basically a month into it, the event ends. Right. And then we get this email saying, oh, sorry, by the way, we're kind of bankrupt, so the company's closing.
Holy shit.
So that was kind of my introduction to the working world of like, not everything's going to go the way you plan.
Of course.
Right. And so then from that, basically I was then looking for a new job, and the Dolphins, right, like this sports team, Dolphins had originally contracted this thing. And so I get a call from their director saying, hey, we were told you kind of know how to make this thing work. Can you help us? And I was like, yeah, because I built it, right?
Yeah.
And so I was working with them for a little bit. They flew me out to like Minneapolis for the college basketball stuff.
Okay.
Right? And then from there, I needed to go find a real job, right? So I used to be a teacher. I was teaching computer science, right, out of college. And then when kind of the work dried up there, I went to go teaching younger kids.
Okay.
And then when after that was done, I was like, all right, now I need a real job again, right? So it's kind of this theme of like needing to persevere and find new ways of doing things, right?
Okay.
So then I had applied to, I was going through like job recruiters and that kind of thing, right? So I don't know if you guys know, but in the tech world, job recruiters, it can be hit or miss, because the reality is that they get paid when you get hired.
Of course.
So they will say anything they can, right? They'll say even the Nobel Peace Prize if it'll get you hired, right?
Absolutely.
So I got this job at a medical company called Thermo Fisher, right? And so basically I was living in Newport Beach at the time, and I'd drive from Newport Beach to Oceanside basically every day.
Oh, wow.
Right. So like 50 miles one way.
Yeah.
So I'd get up, 6 a.m. to be ready for 8 a.m. meetings.
Crazy.
Okay. So I was doing that for like a year and a half or so, and I was a contractor, and I was told like 3 times, we'll get you on full time, just like let it happen. Right. And I was like, sure, I'll just keep working, that sort of thing. And then COVID happens. Right. And because I was a contractor and you don't go through the bureaucracy of like, we need to give you 90 days or whatever, I was the first one to go.
Wow.
Right. And so, yeah, basically I had applied, to work at a couple different weed companies before that. Right. So I kept in contact with one of the guys that I knew over there. Right. And I was like, hey, so I need a job. Right. And he's like, I don't know if we really have anything for you right now.
Okay.
And then about an hour later, he calls me up and he's like, what do you know about validation systems? Right. Because the reality is that this is about 2020 or so. And there's a couple of brands that are getting counterfeited pretty hard, right? And so it's like, okay, we need someone that has like a tech background to build like an anti-counterfeiting system, right?
For sure.
So you have like this unique code on there, you scratch it off, you go to the website, you validate it.
Beautiful.
Right? So that was kind of the first thing I did. And then...
And this didn't exist before that?
No, because, what had happened is that they were kind of shopping around and looking at like, how could a development company do this? But the thing is that, and a thing you're going to find out with MyTrace is like, until you're actually in the trenches with people, you're never going to understand it the same way.
Of course.
Until you actually are there with them.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, they had contracted around, and it was gonna be like 10 grand a year just to maintain this thing. And like at that point, you might as well just hire someone, because then you're going to want updates and all that kind of stuff too. Right. So I had built out, this validation system and, kind of proved it. And it was kind of one of those funny things. Like, so the company that originally contracted it, when I went in to show them it was done, they thought they were pitching like this idea to me. So here I am already with it completed, and their thing, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Right. So there's kind of this like conflict of like, wait, right. But it was cool because then they saw like, okay, this guy works pretty fast.
Yeah.
But so idea there is that, we were talking about Thermo Fisher and all that, right? So I went from Thermo Fisher now to this cannabis stuff. And then, the validation stuff was done pretty quick. Like, it's not a huge investment of time, right? And then it became this kind of idea of like, okay, well, what's next?
Yeah.
And then, with the companies I was working with, kind of the agreement is like, we're running in 5-6 different systems to manage our business, right? We got one thing for our inventory, one thing for sales, one thing for manufacturing, and none of them really talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right. And then on top of that, maybe spreadsheets on top of everything else.
Yeah.
And so the idea became is like, okay, well, you build this thing that'll help us, and, we'll become your biggest referrals. Because then it's not me trying to say it's works. It's like literally just look around you.
It's working. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I built that, and kind of the story of like, we were talking about with business and that sort of thing. It's very much a story of resilience. Right. And so I built MyTrace twice is kind of the end story of how we go through this. Wow. Right. So the first time through, I had kind of built it based on like my programmer background. Right. Because like the way programmers build things is going to be a little bit different from the way people actually use them.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would assume that's the same way the engineers who engineer the cars and the mechanics who build them, right. they're not really on the same page.
Right. I mean, the way I built it, it's like normally when you build software, it's like just one action at a time, because then you're not like mixing it with other things that are happening. Right.
Yep.
And the immediate feedback I got is I don't have to go to another screen to click this, to submit that, right? I want to do it all on one page. And so it was kind of like me having to unlearn all the things I had learned classically.
Okay.
Right. In the same way that, I don't know, maybe like a musician learns to like do things a certain way, right? And then you're told, well, no, because this is how it actually works in the real world.
Yep.
I think that's kind of the important thing to remember is like school will teach you one way, right? You're going to learn like, here's how you should do it.
Yeah.
But when you're actually in the field and like business, it's like, no, you just have to make it work.
Here's what works. Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
And so a lot of it for me was just kind of relearning all of that, right? And again, I have the technical background, but then it was understanding it from like the user perspective, right? Because the reality is that like a lot of software developers, they're never talking to the end users. Like when I was working at Thermo Fisher, right, with corporate companies, that sort of thing, I had someone that would actually talk to the end users for me, and they'd relay ideas back to me saying, here's what we need at a technical level.
Got you.
Right? Because what it comes down to is like, the more technical you are, you have to remember like people are not going to remember, like not going to know what all that means. So you need to have like a translator in between them. Now, here I am in this cannabis space where no one really has that kind of background. And so I have to learn like, okay, how do I change how I'm doing it to make sense for you, right? The same way as a teacher of like, I can't expect you to understand. I have to figure out how are you understanding it and then retranslate how I'm saying it back to you.
Absolutely. So basically you came in and you saw the need for just something more seamless than what already is going on.
I mean, it's like, right, because cannabis was more or less illegal for so long. It's like no one could really be advertising saying we're a cannabis product.
It's true.
Right? And I think kind of something important to mention is like MyTrace is not necessarily cannabis specific, but it's been built inside the industry to understand all those things that are needed, right? Because the reality is that, people will take off the shelf software and they're going to be like trying to Frankenstein force the thing to work rather than like having it work in parallel with their company.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think that's kind of one of the bigger selling points of it is that, okay, so you got this software that works directly with your company. And then on top of that, like we're talking about, is that when I was a software developer at, these other companies, I never interact with the end user. So I never really know how they were going to use it.
Yeah.
Right. So now here I am building it, but also having to understand from the end user perspective, because I also got to train these people.
Of course.
Right. Of here's this thing I built, but here's how you also use it. So at least from that, it kind of comes to the teaching side of it of like, okay, not only, do I understand how it works technically, but then as I'm pitching, as I'm explaining it, goes from here's just a bunch of random features, go figure it out, to here's how I can make it work for your company. Right? Because the hardest part is getting started, right? The hardest part is, okay, cool. Now that we got this thing, how do we train people? How do we maintain it? All of that. And so it goes from just like I said, here's random features to here's actually how you use it.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's been really cool for me.
Pretty dope. And obviously you said you went from looking for jobs to now building this. What's the biggest difference between working for someone and now having your own company and having to, everything falls on you?
Sure. Right? So if you're not working, like there's no one that's going to be doing it harder than you are. Right. I think that's extremely important is that, there shouldn't be anyone that's working harder than I am for my company, or else they're just going to go start their own.
Absolutely.
Right. And so, yeah, like literal, you've probably seen my schedule on my phone that I think I showed you, right?
Yeah.
And I did that, because it's like, okay, so when I was working with these other companies, like, they're contracting for MyTrace and all that, they don't really know what I was doing, right? It's like, you're going to bill us for this, but we don't really know how you're spending your time.
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, let me literally build out every hour of every day to show you verbatim what I'm doing.
Send you my schedule.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because then at that point, it's just like, all right, just send us the bill, shut up. Right.
Yep.
So, but yeah, so like going from kind of like building this thing for other people now for myself, it's kind of been like, it's always been a thing for me in the end, right? It's like all the time I'm investing is eventually meant to help me or, help others in the end, right?
Absolutely.
I think the other flip side of it is now, instead of it being like, oh, well, here's what you guys want or that sort of thing, like now I'm kind of in the reins of it all. And like a conversation I had with one company is that whether it does well or good or bad is all on you.
Yeah.
Right. There's no one else you can blame. And I think that's extremely important, right? Because, when you run a business, it's like you are the sole reason it works, right? If you truly believe in it, sort of thing. Right?
That's true.
And so it's just like a lot of things I've learned along the way, just because I've had to do it by fire. Right?
For sure.
Because again, like I said, all of my previous job experience has been for someone else.
Yeah.
And so like, I think a lot of it's been not just the business side of it, but also like personality.
Yeah.
Right. Because I used to be very introverted. I wouldn't really even maintain eye contact with people.
Okay.
Which obviously we're doing pretty good now. Right. Yep. But it was literally just like, I had to learn how to, like I already had the technical side down, but I had to learn how to sell it. Right. How to, cause it's not just like MyTrace, here's software. It's like, here's a real person behind it.
Absolutely.
Right. A real person that has, their own personality, their own personal life, emotions and that sort of thing behind it.
Yeah.
So, it's literally just like, I don't know if I want to explain it this way, but like, in Walt Disney, right? Walt Disney and Mickey Mouse, there's kind of like a parallel between the two of them. Of course. Right? It's kind of the same thing, but like at a software technical level in a way. Right?
Okay. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And now this being a new thing in the marijuana industry, how receptive are they to it?
So what's been really cool is like when I've been talking to new companies, like literally last week, I was talking to a group of stores, but they also have like an internal brand. And they were really talking about like last week, there's somebody that should like build this all in one system to make this stuff work. And I was like, hello, yes, I'm here. Yeah. Right. So like, it's been cool because it's like, the hardest part is getting people to understand what you're doing. Right. But it's really important because now that I have, people that actually understand it, they go and tell their friends.
Absolutely.
Right. Like I literally get these email submissions from, hey, got referred by X person. And that's been the most important part because it's like, for the longest time there, I had to be the cheerleader saying, no, this thing really works. I just need you guys to understand.
Absolutely.
Right. And now I've got kind of these big name recognitions of like saying, no, this works.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's a huge thing because like you said, you can have something, you can sell it and it doesn't do.
Right. Because nobody understands it.
Yeah. But if you use the tool in the correct way, it can help you in a world, like a world of difference. So do you think that the biggest thing for this now is just educating people and letting them know that it exists and that there's an easier way?
Right. I mean, that's the hardest part of my job right now.
Of course.
It's just like, this thing exists. And when they see it, they actually understand like, okay, this is literally everything we've been doing manually, but now way easier.
Yeah.
Right.
So now say someone who's not in cannabis, how could MyTrace benefit their business?
Sure. So the immediate parallel example I'll give people is like when you think about a vape, for example, right? So you've got maybe the hardware itself, and then that gets filled with distillate. Okay. When you think about Jamba Juice, you've got a cup that has juice concentrate in it. All that changes is the words.
Absolutely.
Right. And so really just comes down to is like, how do you utilize it? And the thing is that with working with all these different companies, you kind of like learn kind of like recipes of like, okay, here's what they did and here's how we made this work. And then you just kind of figure out, okay, that's how I translate it to everything else.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I can kind of relate to this on a personal level because I used to work for a huge oil company.
Sure.
And I did, whenever we'd have to log in, we'd have to log into like 3 different programs.
Yeah.
Because this info was here, this info was here, this info was here. There was nothing that like was a master.
Sure.
So I'm sure even, I'll say it, Petro, you guys could probably use something like MyTrace.
Yeah.
And it would make just their job easier too, because as fucking, no offense, but as a customer sales rep, they're making you do 8 times the amount of work when they have 8 fucking programs that you need to learn how to use. If you learn how to use one, you're good to go.
And that's kind of the cool part about it is like it's built to be very consistent. So you learn one part of the program and it remains consistent everywhere else, right?
Gotcha.
And so normally when I train people, it's not just like me just monologuing the entire time. The first part of it is me walking people through it, saying like, here's what to expect. Like, hey, look for this certain color because this means a certain thing, right?
Gotcha.
And then I flip it and I say, okay, now you walk me through it, right? Because the reality is like from my background in teaching, it's like, okay, it's great if I know it, but the reality is you need to know it.
Yeah.
And so the idea here is like, now we're doing this remotely where I need you to talk to me and have me click through it. Because now you're like remembering it like mentally of what you're explaining and all that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's been kind of like, it's taking kind of all these things I've done previously and then kind of just putting it all into one.
Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. And now, how do you see this helping the industry, say 5-10 years down the line?
Sure. Okay. I think a lot of it comes down to, so like some of the conversations I have with people is I ask them, oh, how do you do bud tender trainings? How do you do your in-store events, right? How do you manage your inventory and all that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just like, we don't, right? Because they're like, we have no system or no way of managing it. It's
nothing
like,
in place.
Okay, not only do I want to help your current progress, but I might want to even show you like, here's what you could be doing, right? If you don't have a certain current process in place. And so again, it goes back to kind of that whole teaching sort of thing, right? And so, for me as a teacher, I'm not into the whole like competitive, I need to be, the top number 1 in the industry, right?
Yeah.
It's like, just like we were talking about before, is like, how can I kind of be in the middle and help everybody that I work with, right? And that's been actually really important for me is like, when people realize that like, I'm not doing this for me, I'm like, it literally just, it's something that's been like something I appreciate, right?
Yeah.
To be able to help other people. They're much more receptive to it, right? Because the hardest first part is like, okay, is this guy just trying to sell me something?
For sure.
Right. And then when they realize like, no, literally like your success is my success, like that kind of flips the mentality a little bit.
Absolutely. It'll
Right.
definitely make them work a little harder.
Sure.
And in terms of just knowing like, okay, this guy, like you said, is not trying to sell me something. He's actually trying to fix and improve my business. That's on a deeper level, because now instead of being someone who's like, oh, let me grab money from you, it's like, no, let me help you make more.
Right.
So I feel like a lot of people will be receptive to that and will want to have a conversation with you.
It's funny. I was in New Mexico, right? So that was at Lucky Leaf this last year. And there was 2 brands that, a little bit competitive, a little bit of a beef. But then we went to a bar and they both bought me a drink.
Okay.
Right. So it's like, all right, there's a little bit of peace here while I'm around. Right?
Beautiful.
So
what do you think like your best like strategy would be to market and get yourself out there to more of these companies?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the thing is that there's a lot of changes happening in the industry right now, software wise. And so people are kind of looking for this solution. And some people are even like, we'll just go back to spreadsheets because we can't afford, whatever's out there right now.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, not only does it work pretty well, but it's also meant to be affordable for anybody. Right. Because again, the idea here is like, if I have just one big brand on the system, you're going to alienate the people that are just starting off being like, we're not there yet. That can't work for us.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea is like, whether you're just starting, you're a mid-sized company, you're an MSO, and vertically integrated, it's like just everything, right? I'm trying to make it work for anybody at a price point that works for anybody, right? Because then instead of it just being like, oh, I've got 1 or 2 big brands, because the other issue is like, if they leave, then you just lose 50% of your revenue.
That's it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so by having kind of this wide, catalog of everybody you work with, right? Then it's like it works for anybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And now your background is tech, but you've worked in a couple of different industries at this point. You've worked in cannabis, you've worked in non-cannabis. What is the key, like, what do you think is one of the major differences in the cannabis industry opposed to other industries?
Sure. Okay. So like in the corporate space and that sort of thing?
Exactly.
I got myself in trouble sometimes for my personality.
Okay.
Right? Like I've got a very sarcastic, dry, witty humor, right? And so I had once got an email at one of those corporate jobs and they're like, hey, Bruce. And I was like, all right, well, you're like 80% of the letters there. That's cool, right?
Yeah.
And then I got written up for that. Like, you can't talk to people that way, right? And so I think like the thing I enjoy about cannabis the most is like people are just very, it's not that corporate, right? Not that it's not professional, but it's just like, people are much more open and real with each other.
For
right?
sure.
I think maybe some of that comes from like the reality is that people are getting high, right? And they're probably the most honest, true version of themselves with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And so I really enjoy that because like, in the corporate space, I always got to like walk on eggshells with people. And it's like, you know, the thing is that I think especially in the cannabis industry, corporate stuff really won't go over too well because they want to know that somebody's real, right? Yeah. They don't want this like guy in a suit and tie that doesn't understand their situation.
Yeah.
So
it's true. No, it's definitely, and in the space, I feel like there's a lot of pushback on like corporate.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want this to become the big industry. They want the small people to survive. And now, speaking of that, does this benefit someone who's not on a mass level that still needs to integrate some kind of system?
Yeah, of course, right? I mean, the thing is that kind of the way I explain MyTrace to people is that you can use as much or as little of it as you want. We're just charging per user.
Gotcha.
Right? And the whole point is the other flip side of that is like if someone's like, oh, if I just had this feature, I'd be able to do my job. It's like, no, I'm evening the playing field and giving everybody the same amount of features. It just comes down to the crew running it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So utilization of the tool is going to be key.
Right. I mean, that's the thing is like, you know, you give... It's kind of like a chef, like we were talking about, right? You give two different chefs the same set of ingredients, they might come with two different dishes.
100%.
And it just comes down to skill level.
Very true. Very true. And now, does it take like much skill? Is it easy to learn?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so the thing is like I said, so I used to be a teacher, right? I taught at the college level and I taught kids that were like 6 to 18 years old. I taught kids how to program that couldn't read.
Wow.
Right. And so we'd use like color coding and stuff like that. And so there was this like kind of elementary thing called Scratch, where it's really just like blocks that you can connect to each other and they got like colors and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And so for the kids that couldn't read, we were like, all right, well, let's at least have them understand the logic of it. Right.
Gotcha.
And like I said, you know, a lot of it is about understanding where people are at their level rather than expecting them to change for me.
Okay.
Right. And that's the thing is like, you know, so when we like anytime somebody starts something new, I've had conversations with people who are like, I'm not really like techie. I don't know if I'm going to pick this up. And usually by the end of it, they're walking me through it.
Gotcha.
Right. Because like I said, the consistency is you explain it once, you keep that consistent. And so that way, you know, the expectation is like this thing's going to work the same way the next time I do it.
It's like a meal, bro. Like if you go to a restaurant, you want it to be the same every single time. So if you want to use some shit, you don't want it to change every time. So it makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. What do you say to maybe a young kid fresh out of college, either teetering on the fence of getting a job or maybe starting his own thing in tech? What do you suggest? What's your advice for them?
Sure. I think start under somebody else first, right? Because yeah, you can make mistakes and you can learn, but the reality is that sometimes when you have kind of that directed path of here's kind of at least a good way to do this, I think you can at least learn, right? And from that context, you figure out, okay, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, right? And I think, again, you know, a lot of it is just coming down to how invested are you going to be, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality is like when you own your own thing, it's on you, right? You have to be the one to wake up in the morning, right? Like I woke up at 6 a.m. this morning, right? Because I had a meeting with New York at 7 a.m., which is 10 a.m. their time, right? And it's literally just like, you know, you have to be invested in this, right? Owning a business and kind of doing all that kind of stuff is not a part-time job.
For sure.
Right. And so, yeah, I would say that, you know, if you really want to work for yourself, right, sure. Learn a couple of different ways to do it, maybe under someone else's, you know, initially. And then from that, you know, okay, so are you ready to do this sort of thing? And then break off and see if you can do it yourself. Right?
I like that.
Because there's a lot of people that will start a business and then they'll be like, I'm just going back to working for somebody else.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, too, it's like, cool, you can start a business and think that school taught you everything, but now you get in the field and you realize real quick, holy shit.
Oh, 100%.
There's some things that school didn't teach me.
Right.
So I think that is good advice to get in the field before starting your own thing, just to get an idea of what you're up against, you know?
And here's the other thing is that even though I used to be a teacher, 100% say school is not for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Because I guess the thing to understand here is like I got into tech because I didn't really have a solid group of friends, but I kind of had this realization pretty young of like, okay, the amount of time I spend now, you know, will be that much more in the future, right? So I started probably like 12 years old, right? Which is kind of a weird thing for a lot of people to think.
Crazy.
Right? And like, it's funny because like when I was 14, I went to a computer shop, right? And it was just like a mom and pop sort of thing. And they're like, hey, you know, you seem pretty cool. Like, do you want a job here? And I'm just like, I can't legally work here, right? But yeah, so like I started pretty young because the realization is like, okay, by the time I'm actually looking for a job, I'm going to have all this experience with it.
Absolutely.
Right. And especially because like when you're younger, you're going to have all that time to learn anyways.
For sure.
Because it is very much a time sink, right?
Yeah.
Time investment, especially for the tech stuff. And like I wasn't a good student either, right? So it's like you take all these contradictions of like, you know, not a good student, didn't have a lot of friends, that sort of thing. And it's like, cool, but I turned that to power, right? I did something good with it.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, at the end of the day, you have a choice of what future you want to live in.
For sure.
So.
And personally, I believe like I wasn't very good in school either.
Yeah.
School's good for people that are really good at listening to rules.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a rule breaker.
Right.
And every time I've bent the rules, I never broke them.
It's gotten better, right?
Yeah, you know, I bent them. I didn't break them.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer in, bro, like you said, school is for some people, but it's not for everybody.
Right. Like if you're going to be a medical doctor, please go to school.
Please.
Yeah, right.
But if you're going to be over here and you want to do something creative, maybe just go be creative.
And that's the other thing, like with the tech stuff, you don't need to go to school. Like you're literally on a computer anyway. So why do you need, like, you know, that was the kind of the biggest thing of like, I could literally just start right now.
Literally. Plus with Google and ChatGPT
Exactly,
and it being 2025, like, fuck, you have no reason to, the research is at your fingertips. How deep do you want to dive into it?
Right.
You know, which I think is really cool. And here's a question I have now, since you're not technically a cannabis company. How is it working with people in cannabis? Are they lazy?
No.
Absolutely not.
No. I mean, the thing is that just like all the other misconceptions we were talking about, right? Some of the events for cannabis stuff is more regal, like more interesting, more, you know, expensive than actual events that people are having, right?
I agree.
So I think there's like a lot of stigma and just people not understanding, right? In the same way that, you know, people might be like, oh, you know, cannabis just have so much money in it. It's like, no, you literally need to be inside of it to understand.
Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of money to be had, but
Right.
like if you don't know what the fuck you're doing,
Right.
you ain't gonna get none of it.
So,
which is, it's a factor. But I think that that's super cool because I just feel like that's a stigma that people just think about weed. So obviously if you work in weed and you're around weed all the time, you must be lazy, right? Nah, son.
Right.
I haven't met anyone on this side of the industry that's been lazy, because you can't be. You cannot be lazy in this industry. If you are, the other people are just going to come in and take over.
I mean, that's kind of the thing is like, you know, I saw the software out there and I was like, well, I could do that. Right.
Yep.
And so that's why I always try to stay like humble about it. Never be like, oh, I'm the best or whatever, because it's like, someone's going to look at that and be like, I'm going to beat him. Right.
Yeah.
And I don't even want to look at it like from a competitive perspective, but it's like at the end of the day, you know, you have to be constantly wanting to do better.
For sure.
Right. And it kind of goes back to the whole learning teacher thing that I was talking about. Right. You know, you can learn whatever and then get stagnant and then never grow from that. Or you can always be, you know, conscious about like, hey, there's something new I could be learning.
Absolutely. And I think you being a teacher definitely helps you when it comes to your business now, because you have to learn how to teach someone.
Yeah,
like I didn't realize that at first, because I used to ski and snowboard, and then I became a ski and snowboard instructor.
Right.
And trying to teach someone to snowboard before I knew how to teach was like fucking, you can't do it, you know?
Right.
You'll end up fighting and screaming at each other. But then when I learned what to say, how to say it, now I can teach anybody.
Yeah.
So that definitely, I'm sure now people have questions. You're not just going to be like, oh, do it like this. You're going to be like, okay, I understand where you're coming from. And as a teacher, teach
Right.
it.
And it always comes from a perspective like, maybe I'm the one that's wrong. Maybe I don't understand.
It's true.
Right. Because the second you make people feel small and you're like, oh, you just need to get it right.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to ask you for help anymore.
Absolutely. And I do like that you brought up earlier, like, oh, school teach how to do it one way. That doesn't mean that's the only way it could be done. I am a firm believer in, like, I like when people figure shit out. And I'm like, hey, show me how you did that. You know, let me see your little trick. And then boom, you never know. Because I'm one of those people too. And I usually figure shit out by accident. I'm like, oh, fuck, that worked.
Right.
This is easier than the other way.
Right.
You know? So I think that's pretty damn cool. So what is one thing you want to come to mind when people hear MyTrace?
Sure. Right. I think maybe one of the first things I'm thinking about here is like something that was actually built by the industry using it. Because it's like one of those things when you think about software, right? Software people build based on what they think people want, but this was actually built based on actual needs.
What people need, yeah.
Right. And actual feedback from those people too, right? Because the reality is that, you know, like I said, when I built things initially with like my programming way, it was like, okay, but that's not how we're ever going to use it.
Yeah.
And so now like that workflow actually matches how their job is. So instead of them having to change for the software, it's like it's working in parallel with their business.
Beautiful.
Right. Which then when you think about like adoption of that, it's like, oh, well, this is just like an extension of what I'm doing physically.
Absolutely.
Right. Which makes people want to use it more.
That's for damn sure. I mean, who doesn't want to use something that is easy to use?
Right.
And now, do you have any like big things going on with MyTrace right now? I know you guys said you're pretty new, but you have some exciting things going on.
Yeah.
You want to tell the people about it?
Sure. Yeah. So we have not just like me managing as a brand, but there's also like the buyer side to it.
Okay.
Right? So idea here is that basically for all the companies that come onto MyTrace, you pick and choose what stores you want on the platform. Right.
Okay.
And because that way, you know, then everybody's keeping each other accountable. Right. Because the other reality is that, you know, you've already got their contact, you already got their store information, the license number, all that. So why do we need to re-get it again?
Yeah.
Right? You've already got it. So you like the brands and companies pick and choose who they want on the platform.
Okay.
Right? And it kind of becomes kind of the synergy of a marketplace, right? So, you know, basically you have the companies that are using MyTrace to manage their business. You've also got the storefronts that are buying from these companies using it, right? And then kind of the flip side here is that a new feature we'll have coming out pretty soon is that you can list your menus for free on MyTrace, right? Because the idea here is like maybe someone isn't ready to commit to MyTrace just yet, but they still want to be able to have their menus, right? And so the idea is that basically they can list their menus for free. The stores will see it, and then basically there's going to be a split between, hey, you know, they don't fully use MyTrace yet, but you can still place like a mock order to them.
Okay.
And then people that are fully utilizing MyTrace, right, you can place like a real order to them.
Beautiful.
The point being is that I'm trying to have a solution for anybody.
Okay.
Right. Again, always coming from that perspective of like, how do I help people?
Absolutely.
Right? So it's like, I don't even care if you pay for MyTrace. Obviously, I'd love you to, but the thing is that, then you get everybody on the platform.
For
right?
sure.
And it really just comes down to, creating a standard process and, helping everybody.
Absolutely. So the more people on the platform, the easier
Right.
it is. Yeah. Okay.
And I've even had stores that are just like, hey, I want all the brands I work with on your platform because I prefer it over anything.
Absolutely. And now, who are like some customers that could potentially reach out to you, say, tomorrow?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is that I work with MSOs that are vertically integrated, right?
Okay.
So they're fully involved in the process. But, I also work with processors and manufacturers and white labelers and co-packers and fulfillment team or like deliveries and distros, right? So it really just comes down to is how much of the platform do you want to utilize?
Okay.
Right. And it's literally just because the other thing is that because it's software, it works in any state, right?
Absolutely.
And so that's the thing is that, we're always just open to working with anybody and just finding, hey, here's that kind of puzzle piece to make this work for you.
Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. Man, I think it's really cool shit. Tech for me kind of is above my level when it comes to thinking tech. I always just think, holy shit. But it sounds like something that you created that is easy to digest. So even someone like myself would pick it up and probably benefit.
Sure.
Which is pretty damn cool. Is there anything else that you think the people should know about MyTrace?
I'm just thinking here. I mean, I've kind of gone through a lot of it, right?
Absolutely.
Again, I think it's just like, like we're talking about the corporate thing, we're not a big, giant corporation, all that, we're just a bunch of people that believe in what we're doing. And I think that especially from like, something that'll resonate with people, it's like, no, they're doing this because they believe in it, not just because they're chasing a paycheck.
Absolutely.
So
now, if anybody watching this wants to get in contact with you, how can they contact you?
Sure. So our Instagram is MyTrace System.
Okay.
And then just mytrace.com.
Beautiful. So they can just reach out through email on Instagram or through the website?
It's through Instagram, or you can submit like a thing on MyTrace, and I will read them personally.
Beautiful.
So
this guy's a really good guy. I met him a couple months back, and man, seeing everything he does is just interesting shit to me. Something I could never do, so I definitely
Thank you.
commend you. Okay. And we need people like you in this because if not, I think we're all just going to be confused and having a whole bunch of shit going on, and I think things fall through the cracks easier that way.
Right. Because it's like, I built it because I saw things I didn't like and I didn't want to wait for somebody else to do it.
Absolutely.
So
see, and sometimes people do wait, and they wait for someone like you to come and solve the problems that we have no fucking idea about.
Right.
Well, we appreciate your time and your energy today. Any last words you want the people to know?
Thank you for listening.
Appreciate you listening. Go check him out. Anything you guys need, like I said, it's cannabis or non-cannabis. He can help you out. This is your guy. Just give him a call. Like I said, you can hit him up on Instagram. Go file something on the website itself. But shit, I think that was a pretty good episode. You guys should have learned a lot because I learned a shit ton.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for your energy. And that's it for today's episode. Tell your mom, your brother, your sister, your mistress, whoever. This is not just a podcast for cannabis people. This is a podcast that people like to listen to good stories. So we'll see you on the next episode. Cool.
I just had the bluest dream that you've ever seen, and I can't believe that shit was green, cause it hit so clean, and my history is a mystery. I don't give a fuck, I just hit the tree on a 5th degree. We don't pit for free. If you don't got 5, shit, get up and leave.